Hello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar, Starting a Strong Diversity and Inclusion Program in Your Company. My name is Indras Ghosh, and I'm the Acting Head of Sustainability Projects at the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, IGCC. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us today as the IGCC take another step toward reinforcing our commitment for sustainable development, which is an ever-present foundation within the Indo-German cooperation. Within this commitment, we recognize that there are many challenges, including companies who are facing challenges in their efforts to create more disability-friendly workplaces. Companies have time and again voiced their willingness to be more inclusive and diverse, but often hindered by different obstacles along the way. Persons with disabilities are also too often marginalized and face many hardships despite having the same level of capabilities and qualities as those without disability. We must no longer exclude persons with disability in economic activities and in our lives. If we want to progress towards sustained economic growth based on principle of leaving no one behind. To support companies and persons with disabilities, in 2020, we started an initiative called the Inclusive Workplace for People with Disabilities in cooperation with GIZ and the Global Project for Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities, commissioned by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. This initiative included activities such as best practice exchanges, workshop, and roundtable that involved discussions with experts from private and public companies, government representatives, professionals, and NGOs. Today, we are proud to unveil our publication titled Overview of Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in the Workplace, an Indian Perspective, as the culmination of our inclusive initiative with our partner here today, CBM India. Heartiest welcome to Dr. Varughese, Ms. Falin Soji, and Mr. T.D. Daria from CB India. Welcome and good afternoon to you. We are also joined by Mr. Asif Iqbal from PwC India and Ms. Bhavna Kumar from Deutsche Bank, who will share their industry insights on how companies can create a more inclusive and diverse workplace. Warm welcome to the both of you. For our participants, I welcome you all, and please send us your comments and questions in the chat option in the platform. We will be taking question immediately after each speaker finishes speaking. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome Ms. Falin Soji, Head Impact and Learning CBM India, who will unveil and give you a sneak preview of our publication. Ms. Soji, the stage is yours.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now, Ms. Soji, please.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. In this is my screen share. I'm sorry, I'm not able to see this.
Yes, it should be up any moment. Can you use? Yeah, it should be here. There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to have worked with IGCC, the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, to study the inclusion practices within its companies. The next slide, please. The reason for us to take up this is because of the general barriers faced by persons with disabilities in India. The first among them is the stereotyping. The assumption that quality of life of persons with disabilities is lower, or that they are unhealthy because of their disabilities, or that they are less productive than people without disabilities, or even that they can do only a certain job compared to others without disabilities. There are many misconceptions about persons with disabilities. They are also seen as less productive. There is lack of access to health services and education, skill development, training, as well as physical and IT support in general all over. The study, therefore, wanted to find out what are the issues faced by persons with disabilities. Next slide, please. We see what is the current status of hiring for persons with disabilities in India. As you're aware, the census 2011 shared that among men with disabilities, only 47% are working, and among women with disabilities, only 23% of them are working. 36% of the total persons with disabilities are employed, and 4 times less likely to be hired compared to people with no disability. Therefore, we took up the study, which was to determine the barriers and challenges faced by persons with disabilities in India, the challenges faced by companies in India, that is mainly the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce when hiring persons with disabilities, and to find solutions to create more inclusive workplace in India. Next slide, please. What we found from this, we had about 53 respondent companies, and I'm not going to go through any detail of the study, but we're going to just highlight the main points. Of the employees of persons with disabilities and among the study respondents, 25% reported to have employed persons with disabilities. One of the companies reported that they employ more than 20 persons with disabilities, and of the categories of persons with disabilities, more persons were those with low vision. 48% of persons were employed. 34% were aware of the existence and the importance of the equal opportunity policy and the need for it to be published on the company website. On accessibility of persons with disabilities, 84% of the companies have not yet conducted an access audit of their building. 66% of the companies reported that there is scope for improvement to make their building more disabled friendly. 96% of the companies do not have an accessible website. 88% reported that there is lack of documents such as the e-publication or the optical character reader-based PDF format. 58% reported that their internal or external communications are accessible to persons with disabilities, such as their internal communication materials like the circulars, newsletters, policies, annual reports, vacancy notifications, and so on. So what are the challenges faced by the companies? We found that there are mainly 4 areas of challenges: on recruitment, on support required in employment, in taking things forward, and in sensitization. On recruitment, a major challenge for for the companies is to find a pool of eligible employees with disabilities. They had difficulties managing skills of persons with disabilities with the vacancies available. On the support required, there was uncertainty among companies on how to fulfill the needs of persons with disabilities, including onboarding process and training of persons with disabilities. Companies reported that they are willing to be more inclusive, but often uncertain how to approach it. They also said that there is large scope to improve the awareness among companies about how employees with disabilities are valuable and productive. They do understand the need from the general reports, studies which has been conducted outside their companies, as well as from hearsay. But then they wanted to explore themselves how to do it better. So what are the guidelines that we have for companies? First is to measure the current status of inclusion within the companies. There are many tools, benchmarking tools available. There are organizations who are ready to support to understand the level of inclusion in the companies. So the first thing is to measure the current status of inclusion. The next is to have a comprehensive strategy towards inclusion. The third is to have inclusive skill-based hiring and training process. Fourth is to expand the disability focus during hiring. Fifth, accommodating needs of employees with persons with disabilities, such as reasonable accommodation, and to have partnership with stakeholders, be it at the government level, NGO level, the disability sector, who could then help to promote inclusion. So these are in just the guidelines for the companies. That's it for now. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Soji, for the wonderful presentation, as well as the insights into the publication as well. We do have a question from the participants, so let me just put it forward to you. The question is, how can we access this publication, and where can we download it?
Soon after this event, this publication will be available on our websites, both IGCC and CBM. So please wait a little while and we will make it public.
Right, thank you. Actually, the second one, really quickly, 1 minute maybe. Another person asks, how is it important to involve all employees in the drive to be more inclusive in the corporate workplace?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you well.
Right, so one participant asked if how do we involve all employees to be more inclusive? Because I think to be inclusive, you need more than just policies and procedures. It involves also about employee engagement and bring everyone together to make sure that they understand what is required. So what would your tip would be on how to involve everyone in the company?
It's true, inclusion doesn't happen that easily. It is a step-by-step process. It is the journey. We need to have a participatory planning approach, involvement of all stakeholders at different levels, in all departments, in whichever department it is being considered. We need to have a participatory approach, have a have a good planning, have a deployment matrix, which will support you in the planning, and then we could together, help to build. The key is to identify the barriers and to see what could be the solutions to break those barriers. It could be physical, it could be communication, and sometimes, mostly, it is our own attitude, the non-active acceptance at our own levels. So we need to try to find a way out, to deal with it, and definitely we could work on solutions.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's very well put. And it's also quite eye-opening to see that the specific challenges faced by companies and, of course, persons with disabilities in regards to hiring and matching skills, for example. Yeah, and this is probably something which companies require support in. So thank you for that. And so with that, I would like to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Muhammad Asif Iqbal. Mr. Iqbal is a lifelong champion and advocate for inclusion of persons with disability. He has been living with disability actually when he lost his eyesight when he's 16 years old. That doesn't stop him from having many achievements in his life. Just to name a few, he's the first blind commerce graduate from St. Xavier's College in Kolkata. And in his role as the Associate Director in Advisory for PwC India, he led the assignments on e-governance and HR consulting domain, business process restructuring, assessment centers, and campus interview. He also led the integration of digital inclusion initiative for smart city internal application, web portal, and other government practices for PwC India. He's also instrumental in creating reservation quota for disabled people across IIMs, IIT, and all government universities in India in 2000. Mr. Iqbal, it is an honor to have you here today, although we cannot see you, unfortunately, but we are looking forward to hear your insight on how we can create more inclusive workplace. Mr. Iqbal, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Can you just confirm whether I'm audible?
Yes, you are, sir. Yes, you are.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you. First of all, a warm welcome to all of you, and a warm welcome to TD Dharyal sir, because him and I go way along back in 2000 when he was the Deputy Disability Commissioner, and I filed an applications for being discriminated, being in the IIMs, and he was the one who actually was instrumental in listening to us, to the both side, and finally the reservation quota, not only in the IIMs but the entire Indian universities and colleges was started for persons with disability. Well, as far as inclusive workforce is concerned, but before I get into that topic, I want you guys to think about that charity begins at home. So when we are looking at our products and services which we are offering to the customers, have we ever thought about it? Is it actually serving the needs for everyone else, or have we left out one portion of the community, which is persons with disability, which itself this publications has that that globally it is 8 trillion euros. Correct me if I'm wrong, Indras. That is the purchasing power of persons with disability in the community. So can we can we afford to ignore this market? Not because it is the right thing to do, not because it is the pity or sympathy, but because it makes business sense. Let me give you an example. When we were all confronted with lockdown and we were trying to, organize our basic needs of groceries, you know, technology is what clicks because it's supposed to ease our life. But when I tried doing shopping on popular apps in India, sadly they failed miserably because they did not include a universal design or integrated digital inclusion in them. In other words, I could not use my screen reading software to navigate them. So, can you imagine closing your eyes and working on your cell phone or your computer? Can you imagine working on a laptop trying to navigate a website of your company, of your organization, without using the mouse and only navigating with your keyboards? The challenges becomes manifold if it is not designed with access into minds. Just another example, I just installed an AC and I deliberately asked that if I have to pay a little bit more, I'll buy a smart AC. Well, what excited me more that I can control that not only with Alexa, but I can use my mobile phone, and using that app, I can control the temperature, I can control switch on and off. Well, when I opened it up with the mobile app, sadly I could control at least 80% of it, but 20% was missing. I could not know what is the temperature that my AC is set into. But again, that's where I leverage Alexa on. But the point that I'm trying to drive at, that if I have an option of choosing between few brands of whether it is German or American or Indian, but my one of my parameters of selecting it as a consumer to do that business with that company is that digital channels is accessible or not. Let me give you another example. When I remember I had to renew my motor car insurance. No, don't get me wrong, I do not drive, but I own a car. And I looked at two companies, ICICI Lombard and Bajaj Alliance. When I looked at the ICICI Lombard, I couldn't even navigate their portal because I was determined to renew the policy by myself using my screen reading technology. Well, when I looked at Bajaj Alliance, wow, it was such a seamless experience and I could navigate it with ease. And guess what? I became their loyal customers for the last 5, 7 years. Then I sold my car, then I got a new car, and again they gave me some other companies, but now this time I had a choice and I naturally chose Bajaj Alliance. Why? Because it met all my parameters. So we really, really have to think about that. Are we really serious about diversity and inclusions? Or are we just paying a lip service? If we are really serious, can we take that effort or walk the extra miles of sit down with your team to say, can we make that products or services accessible to persons with disability? Because we all know, as this publication also talks about a little bit, that it does provide a competitive edge. Today, we're using iPhone and the Android, high-end Android. I also use an iPhone, but it's not meant for me only. Yes, I do agree it is a little expensive, but it offers equal access, and people like me, who is blind, can also operate with ease. Well, let's talk about workplace inclusivity. So in the workplace, I recall, when we hired an access auditor for ICT to check out my internal systems. And when they conducted our audit, sadly, 83% of our ICT systems within PwC global applications failed that audit. But the good news was that our top management, the CEOs and including and every one of them, they were very, very committed, and they initiated that journey. And today, whatever we are using globally, whether it is Salesforce or whether there is a time booking software, I'm happy to say that we have come a long way, and all of those things are now digitally accessible. So when I talk about the other best practices, when they're hiring talents with disability, they also give one of the KPIs in the software industries, which I have seen. I cannot name names because of the confidentiality clause, but they have a target to the people managers of those talents to ensure that they are on chargeable projects at least 60% of the time. And that really gives you that sense of empowerment, is when you are making money for the company, when you're feeling that you're able to contribute or add value. One of the other inclusive workplace I've seen is that they actually have a KRAs, which actually says, okay, you'll have to hire X amount of resources or X amount of talents within PWD communities. And this is actually a great deal of companies that actually share up, having this criteria. And of course, it's not that they're doing a huge favor or doing the right things, but it is just making business sense for them, because it's adding not only to the top line or the bottom line, but they're also experiencing that employee engagement is higher. The attrition is lower. So it's making sense to hire or engage this group of talents. Well, but how do we start that journey if you haven't got on? So in my opinion, I have written a number of articles on this. Perhaps Google might probably lead you to some of the articles which actually got published in National HRD Network and Human Capital magazines. So one of the things I talked about, in any companies, whether there's a small, large, or medium, one of the things, the only way to start this, it has to start from the top. They have to be aware, perhaps engage agencies who can do a workshop for you, sensitizations, and they have to be committed to the cause. And they have to draw that agenda from the top, which can be monitored and executed from the top, as well as have a separate dashboard to really track this progress. I'm very, very happy when we look back in the 15 years, it was still a very challenges, and that PWD engagement in India Inc. was low. But now, after we look at 15 years, of course, it's still an evolving journey, and the milestones is still a long way back. But we are getting there, and we still have to go a lot more. But I'm optimistic, because this hope paves path for optimisms. And yes, this journey will achieve its destinations. But now it is time to begin if you have not done so. Thank you. Over to you, Indrasis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Asifikul. That was very insightful and inspirational points you've come across. I would like to highlight, maybe you made many good points, but one thing that we also talk about in the publication is how companies need to start looking at a person with disabilities as a growing customer base. Yeah. it's not only the right thing to do to address the needs of persons with disabilities, but they are also willing to pay more premium to fulfill these needs. And you correctly mentioned how the market size is around 1.6 trillion euros, and if you include their friends and family, that's actually close to 9 trillion euros. From the economic perspective, of course, it makes sense, but as individuals themselves, their loyalty and their capabilities are second to none. So this is what I really like from your speaking slot. We have one question. If you can maybe summarize it in 1 minute. Somebody asked, participants asked, how do you see the progress of companies in terms of competitive advantage of including persons with disabilities in their corporate structure?
Well, I think I have already mentioned this. One of the examples, when we look at Apple, why is it a great company? Why is their product super duper nice or aspirational? Because everything they do is they pay attention to every minute details. Just imagine their product is such a way that people like me who cannot see can also use. So again, this is a competitive edge, right? When they come out with any innovations, any another products, it is, bound to attract attention in the market because they have really thought through that products. Right? And hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry, my earphones died. So this is what I'm trying to say is that because the uniqueness and the innovations that comes out, because it takes into parameters from a diverse set of people, and that's what kind of brings the competitive edge. Where in the consulting world, I mean, it's not that you have a huge set of assets. The biggest asset is your human resource, and that's true for most of the companies. Thank you, Andres.
Thank you, sir. So essentially, through diversity and inclusion, greater ideas and innovation, which leads to competitive. Thank you so much. With that, I would like to welcome our next speaker in the panel. We have another stalwart industry leader who have been an ever-present figure in inclusion and diversity, Ms. Bhavna Kumar, Head HR Deutsche India and Global Technology Centers, USA, Russia, Romania, and India, and corporate functions in Deutsche Bank. So Ms. Kumar has been with Deutsche Bank since November 2015 and has held multiple roles in the organization. She provides a dynamic nature because of the dynamic nature of the organization and opportunities for those who are willing to take risks. She is a staunch advocate for diversity and inclusion and co-lead in Deutsche Bank, driving this topic in the high priority list of the organization. She's a certified mental health from MHFA, and has been working closely on building awareness and breaking taboos, which even more relevant during this pandemic. And she also worked in multiple roles, primarily in human resources with organizations such as Trafigura, Standard Chartered, and Johnson & Johnson during her career. She's a graduate of St. Xavier's College in Mumbai and MBA from XLRI Jamshedpur. Ms. Kumar, welcome, and it's our pleasure to have you today. Looking forward to hear from you and learnings from Deutsche Bank as well. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much for having me, Indras. It's a pleasure to speak with each one of you. today and hopefully address questions that you may have. I think representing Deutsche Bank in this session today is a matter of great pride for me, not just because I'm a co-lead for D&I, but it's something that I truly am very passionate about. And in my role as head of HR and as a business partner, I actually have the unique opportunity to constantly look at um, changing minds, influencing outcomes to make the societies in which we work more inclusive and generate that greater awareness as well. If I were to summarize whatever we try to do in Deutsche Bank in one line, really, it would be we're trying to create an organizational culture where each person can bring themselves to work and be their authentic selves every single day. You do not have to be apologetic about who you are or hide who you really are. Now, whether that is in the form of disabilities, whether that's in the form of your orientation or your gender. So I think those are some of the areas that we're really looking at. And these last 18 months have really been truly unique. And I truly hope that no one ever has to, in future generations, ever has to live through these kind of trying circumstances ever again. But what we realized is that there was no playbook or manual that could have prepared us for this uncertainty, right? And what it really taught us is that there's nothing more important than people. All the things that you would talk about earlier of, fancy building, real estate, location, fancy cafeteria, all of those absolutely weren't relevant anymore, and it's all faded in relevance. So from a perspective sense, we transitioned in a period of 15 days from a 30% work from home capability to 100% work from home capability. And that included our entire population of all employees spread across all our 4 locations, which is across Bangalore, Pune, Mumbai, and Jaipur. And our focus again was really on the following: ensuring safety, right? Are we able to reassure our employees that they and their families are physically safe? So not asking them to come into work unless it's truly safe for them to come back to work. Security, in terms of job security, right? We were very clear that any offers that we had made that were in the market, people who hadn't joined us, we continue to honor each and every one of those offers. As a matter of fact, in technology this year, we've actually onboarded 292 people from campuses, which is the largest ever intake we've ever had from campus hiring in the technology space alone. Support, which was the third thing, right? Offering every single support in terms of insurance cover, medical expenses, quarantine leaves, optionality to work from any location in the country. All of that was something that was offered to all employees to help make them feel more comfortable. And again, focus on work and not have to worry about these other hygiene factors there. And then again, a huge area of focus that has come into play again is on the mental health and well-being of employees and families. What we saw is that with the work from home, the office has kind of come into the into the home space. So we're kind of intruding onto our family members' spaces. We have colleagues who are sitting probably on a dining table, and the other end of the dining table, you have your child probably doing a school assignment, and people at home, my mother would probably be like, okay, where do I put the food? You're not trying to work here. So we have to take cognizance of the fact that home we've intruded the home space, and how do we make sure that we acknowledge the fact that we are intruding the home space and make it even as easy as possible for people to do that. And of course, there was a huge section of our teams in Deutsche Bank across locations who we do have who are people with disabilities. And what we found there again was reaching out to each and every one of them to ensure and to check, first of all, do they have the adequate infrastructure support in order to be able to be effective in their day jobs every single day? Because so many things we take for granted, right? We have fancy ergonomic chairs which can go up and down. You have a backrest. At home, you have a normal chair, which you try sitting on that for 8 to 10 hours, your back starts to give way. So offering something as basic as chairs to employees who need it, laptops to all of our employees, internet connections to all of our employees, in locations such as Bangalore where you do have power surges, giving them a UPS as well to manage so that your connectivity doesn't get negatively impacted. Those were things that we tried to do during the pandemic as well. And reaching out, like I said, to every single one of our people with disability colleagues, any of the other special group employees to say, do you have what you need to be able to do your work? How can we help you more? And any feedback that came our way, it was acted upon immediately. And those are things that we did to help that happen. And our approach overall is based on creating, like I said, a safe and inclusive workplace, right? That it doesn't matter what background, gender, ability you kind of have. It's about the talent and potential that an individual brings. That is the core of our belief. And like the previous speaker said, it starts from the top down. At the same time, we've also looked at, for example, running unconscious bias sessions, which absolutely started at the top of the house. But then also we ran them all the way down to a first level manager, because let's face it, how often will you have a meeting with the CEO of the company, but with your immediate line manager, you're probably speaking with him, her, or they several times a day. So making sure that that manager, while we're able to get people in, like Ms. Soji said, right, recruiting people from that very limited, challenging pool of talent in the market, how do you ensure that they feel comfortable within the organization, in the ways of working, in the culture? So again, training our managers on unconscious biases, calling it out, bringing it into the mainframe of conversations, that it's okay, ask us whatever questions you have, and making sure that we bring it into normal conversation and dialogue. And that really also included things like aligning ourselves with the Rights of People with Disability Act. I mean, one of the findings in your own report kind of talked about a large number of organizations aren't really aware of that. So we've appointed a liaison officer. We have a grievance redressal process. You know, we even did an office infrastructure audit to make sure that, you know, do we have the right office infrastructure when we decide to go back to the office, so that people are able to access the offices if they are people with disabilities, and offering reasonable accommodation where required, both to job applicants, making sure that that's very prominently talked about in every single forum, in every single job ad that we post online, as well as participating in some of the focused job fairs, if you like. So we recently took part in a job fair which was focusing on the LGBTQI, the RISE job fair. We made the largest number of offers there. We're going to be taking part in another diversity job fair in a month's time. So again, having that very concerted, focused effort, because when you have a hiring target, it's very easy to kind of go out there and hire the first people you get, because they want people as of yesterday who'll start to deliver day before yesterday. So how do we make it easier for the hiring manager, or rather tougher for the hiring manager, to say no, right? By showing them profiles of people who are suitable. And at the same time, at no point in time have we said, look, this is a good charitable initiative, or compromise on quality, or do it because it's a CSR event. Absolutely not. You are assessing on talent, on capability, right? Technical skills can always be taught, and really finding those ambassadors in the organization across the entire hierarchy to kind of talk about it and be our ambassadors, because this cannot work if you have just HR talking about it or a D&I committee talking about it. This has to be the narrative spoken by all leadership and all managers across corporate titles. So again, you know, some of the things that we've really done on that is we've actually joined the Valuable 500 movement, which is a global initiative to put disability inclusion on the management board agenda. So we're looking at significantly increasing our PWD hiring versus as a result of that, and taking part in some focused events. Like I've already talked about, ensuring that we have accessible workplace, physical infrastructure to do that. Acknowledging and celebrating, you know, watershed days like World Cerebral Palsy Day, International White Cane Day, International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Again, all of that is not a tokenism. It's really done with the focus of generating that awareness in people's minds that, okay, that's what it means. This is how I can be a part of. And for me, every single forum within the organization and outside that I talk about, my single focus is really on building that allyship across all the pillars of diversity and inclusion. If I'm able to open even one person's mind a day, I feel that that's a day gone well. And I think, a lot of the stuff that came out in the report that you've shared also really talks about the fact that, there is a need to constantly look at building that awareness. And, we at Deutsche Bank are extremely proud and happy to partner with the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce to really look at how we can play our part through sharing our experiences, building advocacy, allyship, and awareness, and breaking biases. I'll pause for any questions. Thanks, Andras.
Right. Thank you so much. I think that was a very, very good overview of what Deutsche Bank have done over the years in terms of supporting persons with disability. Thank you for sharing your insights in Deutsche Bank. Especially need to congratulate you for also taking cognizance on their needs during the pandemic, because I think they were also highly impacted during the pandemic. What struck me is how Deutsche Bank have approached this inclusion not as special initiative, but rather integrate persons with disability as an integral part of the organization. Many a time, I think companies and organizations have been guilty to treat them as a separate group of people. Well, actually, we need to embrace them, truly embrace them for who they are, and also adapt to their need and support them, because, like you said, there is no playbook for diversity and inclusion. Thank you. So we do have one question from the participant. So this is probably a little hard to answer because of the time. So in 1 minute, if you can summarize, what do you think are, maybe 3 shortcomings which companies need to avoid? Because we talked so far about what are the things to do to be more inclusive, but what are the learnings from Deutsche Bank for companies to look for the shortfalls or the shortcomings they should also look for during the inclusion journey?
I think the first thing, and this is coming straight from the heart without really thinking, but the first thought is, I think the first thing that organizations have to be very cautious of is not to indulge in tokenism, right? It's very obvious. It comes across as inauthentic, and it is not sustainable. So it's better not to do it at all than to do something as a tick box or as a tokenism. It's better to do something less, but to do it well and to do it straight from the heart, which has a longer term impact. So for me, that's the one thing I would caution any organization against. Unless I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. So yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you so much for your time, for being here and share your experience with us. With that, let me introduce to you guys, dear participants, our partner CBM India, starting with Dr. Sarah Varughese, Country Director and Managing Trustee, CBM India. Dr. Varughese is no stranger in terms of championing the cause of people, persons with disabilities. He has been involved as Regional Director of CBM South Asia, Country Director, Managing Trustee of CBM India, Medical Advisor. Prior to that, she worked for the World Health Organization, a Southeast Asia Regional Office as Program Manager, Disability and Rehabilitation. She is currently Secretary for Vision 2020, the Right to Sight India, and she authored many papers and various journals as well. Dr. Varughese, I welcome you, and it's great to have you again with us. Looking forward to your insights. And what are the solutions available to companies looking to start and strengthen their inclusion journey? Over to you.
Thank you, Indras, and I'll go on from what the previous speakers have actually spoken. And I would like to say at the outset that can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. So some of these aspects have already been mentioned by Mr. Iqbal about inclusion as a business strategy, how it improves productivity. You need to think of it from the point of improving your business plan, your business strategy, and the clientele. And I won't talk about what we can support you in that. But both the study and Ms. Bhavna's talk also mentioned some of the other issues with inclusion. The need for disability inclusive policies, the need to address physical barriers, communication barriers, attitudinal barriers, and the difficulties of inclusive hiring. Next slide, please. I will say that CBM doesn't do everything, but having been in this sector for so long, what we can do is some aspects of it, and we can also put you in touch with others who can help on different aspects. And I don't think any one organization, be it corporate, be it NGO, be it government, can address all the changes needed to really have an inclusive workshop. We do offer sensitization workshops, and these could be needed at different levels for different staff, something to sensitize management, leadership, but these employees with disabilities are interacting on a day-to-day basis with a large number of people, whether it's their own manager, whether it is their colleagues, and whether it is support staff. We are also developing a gaming experience of disability for employees, and we hope in the next few months to be able to offer that as well to corporates who want to improve inclusion in their workplaces. Next, please. Yeah, so as already mentioned, you need policies, you need frameworks to think about inclusion at different levels. And you need to think about reasonable accommodation. Accessibility is actually something which is mandated under the various acts of the Government of India. Could you go on, please, Indras? And it is not just important for persons with disabilities, but actually for all employees. And this is something where we can support you on. Please go on. Very often when we think of accessibility, most companies, you often see this in banks, probably not Deutsche Bank, but there's a steep ramp to enter the building and hopefully an accessible toilet. But looking at accessibility in a corporate, there are many, the physical accessibility itself, there are many elements to it, from your parking, the entrance, the reception, drinking water, lift controls, emergency exits, evacuation in fire or any other emergencies. CBM is accredited as an access auditor by the Government of India. Next, please. And we offer consulting services to develop accessible workspaces. Some of our corporate clients are on the next slide. We have worked with Mercedes-Benz, Amadeus, Walmart, REC, besides, of course, a host of government buildings around the country, from the northeast to the south of the country in Tamil Nadu. I'd just like to share some elements from our own experience as an inclusive employer. We have had up to 20% of our own staff as people with disabilities. You can just go through the next ones quickly, please. And some of these elements which we don't think of are dual handrails, floor strips on steps, strips at glass doors for people with low vision, non-slip accessible toilets can be very difficult in Indian buildings where very often the washroom floors are raised about a foot or half a foot. But to provide a ramp within a building is very difficult. And if you have employees using wheelchairs or crutches or orthotic devices, anti-skid tiles are very useful. So these are some of the things we have done, but there are other aspects you need to think about. There is accessible communication, accessible information, and technology, of course, enables us to do a lot of things very easily nowadays. But very often it's just a matter of thinking about things. You don't always need a lot of technology. If a company is used just to sticking up a notice on a notice board, you have to make sure that you also send out an e-communication, which is accessible. Beyond accessibility, there are other aspects to being an inclusive employer. The next slide, please. You may want to employ the previous one, please. You may need semi-skilled or unskilled workers who could be people with disabilities. Most of your employees in this category get on-the-job training. So to employ people with disabilities at this level, very often what you need is a training of the trainers in how to actually reach out to people with disabilities and how to train them for what they need in your corporate. We can help you train your trainers, and we can also link you to people with disabilities at various locations, organizations of people with disabilities, school leavers, and other categories of people who could fill these posts. When it comes to skilled human resources, we have some experience both in Bangladesh and Vista with helping train people for the textile industry. And this is for various levels within the textile industry. Various manuals are available and other resources for skilling people for industry. You may be thinking, I don't work in textile industry, but we can also help you access trainers who could work with you to skill human resources for particular industries. And we could take this up for a fee. At the management level, most people who reach the management level as persons with disabilities have come up through a very difficult system, a non-inclusive system of education, of higher education. We've heard of the struggles to get IITs and IIMs to admit students with disabilities. And actually in that area, all our work is just limited to really helping people to complete education, please. And I should say, we usually start with primary education, make sure children get through primary education, complete their school education, and then according to their interests and capacities, They can go on to higher education, technical training, inclusive technical training, and reach other aspects for inclusive employment. So besides this, of course, if any corporates, the next please, are interested in investing to help people with disabilities actually reach these levels, inclusive education, which I already mentioned, but there's also the whole aspect of inclusive vocational training, which is there in a number of locations. We do also work on other sources of livelihood, self-employment, farming, etc., for people who are not reaching to waged employment. And there's also inclusive health programs, inclusive humanitarian response programs in the next slide, in which we try and see that people with disabilities are not forgotten, including in the COVID response. We have partnered with a few organizations to ensure that COVID responses are inclusive, that people with disabilities get access to vaccinations. These are some of the other aspects we are happy to collaborate with corporates on. Finally, I'd like to say that CBM has developed a number of resources which are available on our website, or you can contact any of us on toolkits for inclusion, the inclusion imperative, and there's accessibility toolkits. These are some of the, there's a toolkit on education. So these are some of the things, resources we can share with you. They may not exactly meet your particular situation, but they can be adapted to your own needs and policies and situations in your company. So that's all I'd like to say. Please do feel free to reach out to us if you want more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Varughese, for a very interesting presentation. So throughout our journey together in this inclusion initiative, what very apparent to us was that we need to not only find the challenges, but also provide solutions. And actually, many companies have come up to us and say, you know, we want to be more inclusive, but we don't know how to get the solutions. How do we get help, you know, to do audit, for example, or to get in touch with people, skilled persons with disabilities. Yeah, so to have your presentation spell out what are the different support that they can access throughout the inclusion journey, I think will be very valuable for companies as well. Thank you. We do have one question from participants. If you can summarize in 1 minute, Ms. Bertha asks, who determines the extent and limitation of reasonable accommodation for individual with disability? Is it the company or the individual?
If I could say, this is something which has to be mutually agreed. And any company who is employing a person with disability, I think would be the first to actually reach out to that person and find what are his or her particular needs. And just because a person has visual impairment, it doesn't mean that that person has, you provide 1, 2, 3. It very much depends on that person with the impairment and his own personal skills. So I would say it needs a company who's committed to inclusion would decide that in discussion with the person. If you want to do it as a tick box exercise, it may be different, But otherwise, I think it would be mutually agreed.
Yeah, so that's also the same points which was brought up by our previous speaker, how it is important to communicate with them, to understand what they need, and have rather a customized solution rather than having one playbook for everyone. Because we are all, after all, we are all different. So I think every one of us deserves to be taken care of, to be supported. Yeah? So thank you for that. Now I would like to welcome Mr. Thakurdat Daryal. Daryal, sir, are you there?
Yes.
Hi. Let me introduce you to Mr. Daryal, advisor for Disability CBM India Trust. He is also disability consultant for NILR, Niti Aayog, Government of India, and the United Nations UNESCO. Sir, so if you were to summarize today's key takeaway, how do companies can use this publication and this discussion today to start being more inclusive in the marketplace? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Indras. I think the short sessions have been very useful, and the limited number of speakers have brought home a very, very important and almost the entirely encompassing the issues around the disability inclusion, or rather inclusive setup. It could be any other section of the society. If I were to look at the study, then what our speakers said, the study has brought out the big gaps between what we need to do and what we actually are doing. But then it is not zero. We have already started the journey. It is a great initiative of IGCC, GIZ, and CBM to have conducted such a study, which I think no other industry chamber or organization has done. It's very important to know where we stand and where we want to go, and what the requirements of the law are. So, as Iqbal said, and it is always so pleasant to see Iqbal. It's a mutual, in fact, pleasantry with him, and I feel so proud about him that he talked about universal design. Universal design, making business sense, and loyalty. So these are so important that look at SDGs. It says no one will be left behind. If I do not want to leave behind anyone, that is the commitment of all the member countries, nations, including India, including Germany, including all the countries. So if we do not make our ACs, you do not make our cycle rickshaws, aeroplanes, ships, using universal design, then perhaps we'll leave out a large section of people who you said have some 9 trillion purchasing power, euro. That apart, then we have the social responsibility to ensure that everyone is included. So that way, therefore, we have a long way to go. Without accessibility, perhaps no human right can be enjoyed by anyone. And when it comes to persons with disabilities and elderly persons, the accessibility of physical environment, built environment, information and communication, these three things are extremely important. Of course, attitude, that as Dr. Sarah said, attitudinal problems are the biggest one, but then this physical communication and information technology has to be made accessible if we really want to allow the persons with disabilities, varied persons with varied disabilities, enjoy their human rights. So therefore, we have to focus on accessibility, and Dr. Sarah has said we can come together and help you, IGCC or the member countries. And this is also the thinking at international level. In the morning, I was in the forenoon, I'm still in that meeting of expert group on inclusive employment workplace of UNESCAP, United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. A very interesting presentation was being made by Mr. Esteban, who is a senior disability specialist in ILO, on Article 29 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So the gist of his presentation was that it is not enough to recruit a person with disability. It is not enough to include, but it is important and in fact mandatory now. The laws are very stringent that we provide a decent employment, decent working conditions, and the growth opportunities in the company on equal basis with others. So there are quotas and all this. Internationally, France, Germany, many other countries who have the quota system of 5% have fared very well because their systems are in place. They are perhaps able to afford. That's what we believe, we feel, but then everybody can afford, every company can afford. So therefore, accessibility, inclusion, and it's so important to have a look at the relevant legislations applicable to the companies working in India and Germany. At least we are talking about Indo-German companies. You could be MNC across the world. So wherever you are having a company, you will have to ensure that they comply with the provisions of the law, particularly disability specific law. In our country, we have a mandatory requirement, at least 3 mandatory requirements in the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. One is the equal opportunity policy. Every organization has to have that equal opportunity policy. And if it is not there, then it follows there is provision for penalties. So we have to be mindful of what is there in the act. We should not be caught. That's one. So again, we can the CVM can help prepare equal opportunity policy. We can do it mutually rather. It could be a collaborative kind of effort. Every company should have that. Second, every organization or the company or government or private has to ensure that a person with disability is not discriminated on the ground of disability. There is section 3.3 which says this, that you cannot, the head of establishment shall be responsible to ensure that no person with disability is discriminated against only because the person happens to be a person with disability. And the third is accessibility. Making your existing infrastructure accessible, making your website accessible, ensuring that what fairly in a presentation said, OCR, that any document that you upload in your website must be accessible to everybody, including people with blindness. Iqbal would not like it if the document is simply scanned and put in the website. It's not accessible. So these compliances are very important. And then most important for all of us, for CBM, for the government organization, for anybody, these three things are very important. That we need single organization, single entity will not be able to do much. In the context of CBM and IGCC, we need to cooperate with and we need to converge our strength and resources and make our workplaces more inclusive and the best inclusive places. And I would be very happy if some of the companies, member companies of IGCC, get the national award for being best accessible private company. And I must say at the end, appreciate the effort. The report that has been brought out, the CBM, the IGCC, GIZ, and also Mr. Subhash Bashist, who did work on it, Fairlane, and Dr. Byrne, that the head global project inclusion, and Mr. Peter, DDG of IGCC, and Indras Ghosh, who is the acting head of sustainability projects. Indras has been throughout with us, with our team, and it took keen interest in at each stage of this project. It's very important that we don't stop here. We take it forward. We have come to know where we are, and we have to set the targets. We are also mandated to reach those targets and the compliances. So therefore, let us get together, join hands, and move forward and become one of the best associations or chambers of commerce in India and across the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daria. It's a very good summary of what we are trying to achieve. Like you correctly mentioned, we have made many progress throughout our journey in this initiative. And most important to also remember that we have not started from zero. We have built upon the many good work of companies and NGOs in India, but most importantly also to remember that there are many more progress to be achieved for persons with disabilities inclusion. This inclusion, of course, isn't only relevant in India, like you mentioned. this is also relevant globally as more and more countries are moving or have already mandatory regulation compliances in place to protect and include persons with disabilities in the workplace. The publication, of course, will guide us toward future activities in diversity and inclusion, and also to build awareness on the topic as well, share good practices, which is something that we learned along the way, that we need more companies to raise their hand and say, we want to be actively participating in this topic as well. And of course, IGCC will continue to promote inclusion and diversity, and in a few months, we will be expanding our focus on inclusion with gender-oriented initiative on the Indian workplaces. So I would encourage all of you here today to continue supporting us, to get in touch with us, because like Mr. Daryl said, we need to get together, to put our heads together and to work together to create more inclusive and diverse economic growth in India. With that, I would like to have vote of thanks to our speakers, Mr. Muhammad Asif Iqbal from PwC, Ms. Bhavna Kumar from Deutsche Bank. It was such a pleasure to hear you today and to share your experience as well. And of course, thank you very much. We had the pleasure to work with CBM India throughout this journey. Dr. Sarah Varughese, Ms. Valin Soji, who has been in every step of this initiative, and of course, Mr. Thakur Daria, who always make time for this initiative despite his busy schedule. That's it from us. For those participants who are here today, we will be sending you a copy of the publication directly to your email address. So that's a bonus material for you. And with that, I would like to thank you, everyone, dear participants, to be here. And we look forward to have you again in a few months' time as we further our efforts in this topic. Have a wonderful afternoon to all of you. Take care, stay safe, and all the best. Yeah, that's it from us. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.